Excellent. So everybody, it's really lovely to see some familiar names in here. I hope you will all enjoy our little talk this evening. So it's called Carri-on Recording Beetles. We are here to welcome you to the Carrion Club. So we're going to go through some of the fascinating behaviour and ecology of this group of beetles, cover some of the key identification points, and then give you some advice on trapping, so how you can find these beetles and record them. And then we'll finish up with a quick quiz as well. Participation is not compulsory, but it's just a little bit of fun to end on. Okay, so Matt and I are going to do a tag team thing this evening. Hopefully that works okay. To kick things off, just a little bit about us. So yeah, we co-organised the National Silphidae Recording Scheme, and we've been doing this jointly with Richard Wright since 2016. So Richard's more our silent partner, and he produced the identification key that's freely available and we'll point you to shortly. And Matt and I are responsible for verification of records. So we predominantly do this through iRecord, but we also will accept records in spreadsheet format to the email account that we have. And we also are on a mission to just try and recruit more people to record these brilliant beetles. So that's what we're here to do, to talk to you about tonight. Quite often, as Simon mentioned, we host in-person workshops. The pandemic has put a halt to all of that for now, but we do hope to do some again in the future. And we have a presence on social media as well, so we try to raise awareness about these brilliant beetles through the internet. Now, we know that we're pretty biased, but they are the best beetles. Okay, so globally, there's about 200 species, which is pretty small for a beetle family. And in the UK, in Britain and Ireland, we've just got 21 species that have been recorded here. And that's a really nice, manageable size for a beetle family. They are brilliant because of their behaviours, but also the variety of colours that they come in. So in Southeast Asia, they've got some fantastic iridescent blue species. You've got even some species that have adapted to become parasitoids, beetle parasitoids. So instead of the fantastic behaviour of burying carcasses and doing that, they have actually resorted to using snake eggs, which is really crazy. The other thing is that they've got a fantastic fossil record. So some of the ancestors of today's carrion beetles were around 165 million years ago. So they were probably the early decomposers of early mammals and dinosaurs. They were feeding on dead dinosaurs. How cool is that? So these beetles are pretty impressive. That's why we love them. But more importantly, they are providing a really, really important service for our environment. They are vital decomposers. So they're part of nature's natural cleanup team. And without them, our environment would look pretty disgusting. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, sorry, my slides are being a bit slow. So yeah, they are a small and diverse family, as Ash says, about 21 species, and they are the Nigrophorus. So are we on the next slide, Ash? Or
oh, there you go.
Is it being a bit slow? Just checking. Oh,
I just have a little bit of lag. Sorry about my internet.
Oh,
folks.
Right, cool. I was a bit confused. That's all. Anyway. So for Nigrophorus, which is a subfamily of the Silphidae, they're necrophagous, so they feed on carrion, which is animal carcasses, which is lovely. So they're commonly known as burying beetles or sexton beetles. Sexton beetles because a sexton is an officer of a church, congregation or synagogue, and they maintain buildings and the surrounding areas of graveyards, so perfectly suited for the Nigrophorus spur. Burying beetles, they possess some incredible behaviours, including biparental care, as well as they use anal and oral secretions to cover the carcass into a round sort of ball, removing fur, and then they bury it, which is seriously impressive skill for a pair of beetles to be able to do. This protects it from, sorry, yeah, I'm losing my place. So yeah, carrion of large animals is an extremely nutrient rich resource. It's essential for many species, but it's often scarce because of like farmlands rules. They're not allowed to leave carrion out. as it might affect the animals. And the competition is high. As being a limited resource, it's attracted to vertebrate scavengers like foxes, badgers, and things like that, as well as other decomposers, including sort of bolo flies and other beetles, as well as Silphidae. And by burying the carrion, that's how they sort of reduce this competition. And they're equipped with strong mandibles. And if any other insect eggs or larvae are on the carcass, they'll consume them. And sometimes the beetles are a bit too late though, and the flies do take over. Ash, I think it's
just playing catch up with my slides there. So we've got a little clip of a burying beetle parent in action here. This isn't actually one of our British species, this is an American one. And as Matt mentioned, there's this great investment in burying the carrion that they find, and that's to compete with all the other invertebrates and vertebrate scavengers. So it's this ephemeral resource, it's very time limited, and they really have to get it buried and secure this resource for their offspring. And they've got some extra special adaptations as well as burying it to try and keep this carcass and suitable for their family. They will cover it in these secretions, so oral and anal secretions. I hope none of you are eating, but you kind of know what you signed up for tonight. And these contain antimicrobial properties that actually slow down the decomposition of the corpse. So you can see this was a mouse. I say like it's obvious, you can see it was a mouse. Yes, it was a mouse. It's had the fur removed. They've kind of molded it into a ball here, but the secretions will slow down the rate of decomposition. So this has been known for a while. Once they've kind of prepared the carcass, the parents have mated, laid eggs in the soil beneath, and they actually form a crater in the top, which is the image on the right hand side. There's the little crater that the larvae will automatically come to and sit in, and then they're tended to by the adults. But these secretions, it's recently been discovered that they not only preserve the carcass, preserve the food resource, they're actually repelling rival beetles, which is even more amazing than we initially thought. So they contain chemicals that actually boost these nasty odours that repel competing burying beetles, which is pretty amazing. And then what happens is the parents will pre-digest rotting flesh and regurgitate to the offspring. So it's a really charming, lovely family setup. And is part of the reason why I just find them so absolutely fantastic. So you've got two parents here tending to their offspring, and a little close-up of a female burying beetle tending to her young there. Now, there's some communication that goes on with these beetles, believe it or not. The adult beetles are capable of stridulation. So we know that many different insects can stridulate. The ones that you probably think of are grasshoppers. But these beetles produce their sound by rubbing their abdomen in and out past their wing cases, past their elytra. So if you have a look at the centre of this image, there's kind of two lines on one of the abdominal segments, and this is called the pars stridens. This is like a series of ridges, and then on the tips of the elytra on the underside there are some hairs, and you can't see it very well on this picture, but if you just imagine that as the abdomen is moving in and out past the wing cases, these hairs are pushing past this stridulatory file and it produces a noise. So I have got a little audio clip for you. Hopefully it's going to work. You may want to just whack your volume up nice and loud. I'll play that again just in case. So it's incredibly squeaky. I hope that you heard that. What I can do is I can drop a link in the chat later as well, so you can listen to that at your leisure. So yeah, very, very squeaky. And you'll notice that if you disturb carrion, sometimes you'll hear this noise. So what's even better is that this stridulation comes in three forms. So firstly, we have defensive stridulation. Naturally, this is to ward off any predators, hence us. I mean, I don't speak burying beetle yet, but I think probably in this example, it's defensive stridulation. Secondly, we have courtship stridulation. So they would be doing this to attract a mate. And then thirdly, we've got parental stridulation. So by the third instar, the larvae go through three developmental stages. So the third and final instar, They're quite often moving about the carcass on their own, self-feeding, and the parents will stridulate to signal to them that they can be fed by the parents. So it's kind of call for dinner time. Matt?
So, yes, beetles with Carri-on. There are only a few more puns left, I promise. So they have, they've been observed carrying these mites, and it's a symbiotic relationship with the mites. And in a lot of cases, the pronotum and the elytra can be really densely covered, as you can see in the photo. This is considered a mutualistic relationship with the mites, using the beetle as a form of transportation, so it'll take it from one carcass to another. And once the beetle arrives at the carcass, the mites will leave their host and prey on the fly eggs or the small larvae. And this can assist the beetles by reducing the competition for the carrion. But also some studies have demonstrated that it's not always beneficial to the beetle, as some mites will predate on the Necrophorus eggs as well as all the fly eggs and other things. And plus, with the fitness of the beetle, if they're completely covered in mites, struggle to fly and move around as easily.
Yeah.
Yes, so we do have plenty of resources to help you out, as Ash mentioned about Richard making the key, which can be found on the link that Ash, you put it in the chat earlier on, didn't you?
Yeah.
To the Coleoptera Silphidae recording page. So you can find the key free to download on there. There is an interactive key that's just undergoing edits at the moment, so will hopefully be available soon. And you can find us on Twitter. And also we do help with IDs on Facebook as well, on the Beetle of Britain and Ireland group.
And as Simon very kindly mentioned at the beginning there is a new book as well. So this was something I worked on during lockdown, one of the productive elements of lockdown. I have co-authored this with Steve Lane and Colin Lucas, a atlas of hysterids and sylphids of Britain and Ireland. So thanks to the recording scheme and all the wonderful recorders that have supported both schemes over the years, we were able to produce this. So many of you will probably be familiar with atlases. This is a little bit more than just your bulk standard atlas, because it's also got identification keys for both families and extensive notes on the ecology and also conservation statuses of both groups. So perhaps we can have a little flick through at the end and give you a little preview if you're interested, and also drop a link in the chat for that one as well. Shameless plug.
So, recognising the carrion beetle, they are medium to large, so they are nice and easy to spot once you see them. They've got 10 or 11 segmented antennae, and they tend to have a small, a strong or gradual club. They are dark coloured with distinctive red-orange markings, and some also have truncated wing cases, so they have a few abdominal segments exposed. And a tarsi of 555, so they have five segments to the tarsi on the front, middle, and back legs. And there are two subfamilies. So there's Necrophorinae, which will have the distinct club, and the Silphinae that have the expanding gradually club antennae. Sorry, not with the distinct club. Just to clarify. So here are the burying beetles. So you'll find an easy one to spot straight away is Necrophorus humata. It's got no orange markings on there. And then you've got a couple that have got yellow hairs at the front of the margin of the thorax, which is Vestigator and Vespalo. And they can be told apart due to the curvature of their back legs, hind tibia. Then you've got the Necrophorus vespaloides, which is the only one with black antennae. And then you've got Investigator and Interruptus. It can be a little bit confusing, but they've got no yellow hairs on the thorax. And there's a couple of ways to identify these apart. One with the front orange band is continuous, which is Investigator, and Interruptus has an interrupted front orange band. But the best way, because that's not always the most reliable feature, the best way is by the yellow hairs on the final abdominal segment of investigator and on all of the abdominal segments of interruptus. So
if you're brand new to burying beetles, it can seem like quite a lot in one go there. So Matt's going to kindly take you through one by one for a bit more of a closer look.
Yeah. So here's Nyctophorus humator, and as part of Ash's brilliant book, we now have some common names as well, also English names. So this is called the Undertaker, very suitable name. So this one's quite common and widespread. It's crepuscular and is active from sort of Feb to November, but it does peak in May. So get ready, everyone. It's coming. You know, it's here already, but also get prepared because it'll be quite common at the moment. It's found in a wide variety of habitats, more or less wherever there is a suitable source of decomposing animal material. So next, as we've got here, is Vespuloides. And again, another called the common burying beetles, very common, found almost everywhere really. It's active during the day between March and November. Probably our most widely distributed species.
And just to add in as well, this is the one that you'll find flying during the day. On really warm, sunny days, sometimes people have previously thought that it was maybe a bumblebee or something, because when these beetles are in flight, they invert their elytra and they're kind of yellow orangish on the underside. So you'd be forgiven if you thought it was maybe a strange bumblebee.
So this next one is Nyctophorus vespulo, the bent leg burying beetle. As you can see, its hind tibia are very bent. And it's sort of scarcer in Scotland and Ireland, but active in between May and September. Yeah, just widespread across England and Wales. So you'll find it nicely in Kent, I'm sure. And this is Vestigator. So it's got an IUCN status of vulnerable. It's nationally rare in Britain. This species used to occur, or formerly occurred, in Wales at a single location. I'm not going to try and say the Sheer. I can't say that one, Ash, I'm afraid. But it was last recorded in 1897, and its current strongholds in West Norfolk and East Suffolk, active between April and October. But yeah, it is nationally scarce. Sorry, Ash, you might want to expand on that a little bit.
As you can see from the map, that's one that's in the new book. Kent is a bit of a blank area for this species. I don't think there's any more recent records since like 1920s, 1930s. But you know, it's right on the border. So of course, you may all be able to venture out of Kent at some point. So it's one to be aware of. With the yellow hairs on the pronotum, it can be quite similar looking to Vespulo, but remember to look at the back legs there. They're nice and straight on Vestigator, and we'd be incredibly excited if you see this one.
So Interruptus, as I mentioned before, Nyctophorus interruptus, the interrupted burying beetle. So this one, it's got orange clubs, got a hairless pronotum, and it's the top orange banding is usually broadly interrupted, but sometimes it can appear just as close as the back markings. So the best way to tell it, apart from Investigator, is the golden hairs on all of the abdominal segments. It is nationally scarce in Britain.
But one that definitely occurs in Kent, so be on the lookout.
And here is Investigator, most commonly mixed up with Interruptus. This one's a bit more common and widespread, active in April to October. Sort of peaks in August. It's a late summer breeder, and its offspring overwinter as prepupa and completes development in spring. And with this one, you can see how the top banding is a bit closer together, but again, the best way to tell it is judging by the golden hairs on the abdominal segments.
And we don't put this in the key, but a little fun feature for you to notice is that the second banding, the markings kind of look like two Scotty dogs. Don't base all your identifications off that, but it's a nice little, it always makes me smile when I see them. So moving on to the other subfamily, as Matt mentioned, we split the Silphidae into the two subfamilies, and the key feature to be looking for is those antennae. So they don't have distinct clubs. They may become expanded gradually towards the tip, but nothing like the burying beetles. So as an overview, you can just see general kind of shape and appearance here. This is just some of the sylphines. I'm not going to cover all of them just because there's a couple that we believe to be extinct now, some that definitely aren't relevant to for the topic of today, but hopefully cover some of the most common ones. So this is our largest sylphid. This is Necrodes littoralis, also called the shore sexton beetle. A little bit confusing. We didn't change the common name of this one because we feel that it's already very well established. But it's not a sexton beetle, is it? It's not a burying beetle, so technically not true. And the thing is with this one that it can confuse people. It's all black and it does have orange tips to the antenna. So if you're maybe new to identifying these beetles, that's an easy one to trip up on. But let's compare it with Nicrophorus humata quickly. Those clubbed antennae look completely different. We've also got differences in the shape of the pronotum. It's much more circular in Necrodes, and the elytra are very different. So generally Necrodes has this like flatter appearance with really distinct lines down the elytra. And a fun fact for Necrodes is that the males have very chunky hind femora, chunky thighs. This is an adaptation that helps them with mating. To go back to my earlier slide there, one of my most interesting records for Necrodes was at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, where I'm based in Edinburgh. We were monitoring the corpse flower that was in bloom there, and we did capture a female Necrodes littoralis in the giant stinky flower. This is a real highlight. It's probably the only record of Necrodes littoralis at a corpse flower. And we have the three species of Thanatophilus. Thanatophilus rugosus and sinuatus are the two that will be found in your area in Kent. Really nice to separate just based on the sculpturation of the elytra there. So rugosus is nicknamed the wrinkled death lover. It has these wrinkly, kind of lumpy, bumpy elytra, and sinuatus has really nice, smooth elytra in between the striae here. There is a third species, but this is incredibly scarce, only found in Scotland and Ireland. Another feature, though, to separate it out, if you do venture up this way, is that sinuatus has what we call a shoulder tooth. So you do need a hand lens to see this character, but it's just this little pointy structure on the shoulder of the elytra there, which Thanatophilus dispar doesn't have. And what we haven't really touched on yet is that we call the whole family carrion beetles, but actually, to be accurate, it should be carrion beetles and their allies, because in fact there are some predatory species and some vegetarian species in the family. So this is the predators. Kind of looks like a band like a cover album or something. We have 3 predatory species in the family, and the one that you're most likely to encounter, and you probably already have, is the common snail hunter. So as its name suggests, it predates snails. It has fantastic adaptations in that it's got a really narrow, elongate, skinny head, and it uses that to gain access to the mollusk inside the shell. And it's quite similar to fireflies, glowworms, in the way that it attacks its prey. So it will bite the foot of the mollusk will then retreat into its shell and emit a kind of defensive mucus. The carrion beetle is adapted with digestive enzymes, so it can break through that mucous membrane and then start digesting the flesh of the mollusk. I feel quite sorry for the snail, but it's a fantastically feisty predator. The easiest time to find this one is actually in winter. Excuse me. And it's because it overwinters under bark. So you can check any fallen logs, gently prise off the bark. If you are going to do this, would recommend putting it back afterwards. Don't do lots of habitat destruction on our behalf. But also check under lovely like mossy areas, anywhere that these beetles will be overwintering. But you can also see it in the summer months. Very similar in shape is Ablateria laevigata, which is the smooth snail hunter. You can see the key difference here is that it doesn't have those strong ridges on the elytra, and also the pronotum is quite domed. It's another predator of snails, and it has exactly the same tactics for predating on its prey. And another predator we have here doesn't go for snails, it goes for caterpillars. So it's predating on moth caterpillars, predominantly on oak trees, but also we have several records from hawthorn as well. So survey tactics for this would be beating on oak trees and focusing our efforts from now onwards, really. It's most active between April and June, and it is nationally scarce. I did check this up just before. We don't really have any records from the Kent area, so this would definitely be one to focus some efforts on. And then last but not least for the sylphines, penultimate for the sylphines, is the Clypea opaca, and this is, it's almost like a teddy bear. It's absolutely beautiful. It's the golden beak carrion beetle. So it is a vegetarian, previously considered to be a pest of beet crops, but now nationally scarce. We're not going to go on about pesticides too much, but I think you can probably infer something here. And then one that is very ubiquitous across Britain and Ireland is the red-breasted carrion beetle. It prefers woodlands, but it's not too fussy about what it eats. So it will go for carrion, but it will also go for dung, and it's got a particular fondness for the stincomb fungus. So you can often see it in great numbers on these, active between April through to August. And it's day active, so you'll often find it just wandering about on paths. And then I just wanted to mention the larvae. So sylphid larvae, sometimes you do come across, but these will predominantly be the sylphines rather than the necrophorines. That's because obviously the necrophorines, they are safely away in the carcass, guarded by the parents, whereas the sylphines, they don't have any parental care. So they will be out and about. Some of them are predatory, so they'll be searching for prey, and these are the ones that you might notice. So this is just kind of a plea. This is something that I'm working on at the moment, and if you do come across any, take some snaps or potentially collect some voucher specimens and get in touch. So at this point, we can have a little break and take some questions before we move on to the next section, which will be about trapping and recording. If Simon can let us know if there are any questions.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything at the moment.
Well, that's right. We can plough on through and save them to the end.
Okay. Do people? I've had some difficulty in the past with pitfall trap captures between Silphidae larvae and glowworm or false glowworm.
Yeah.
Larvae, especially if they've started to fall apart. It can be a bit tricky to when you know they're both in the area.
Yeah, that's there. So they're often, the sylphines are confused with either glowworms or with carabid larvae, and even sometimes woodlice. People think they get quite woodlice-like, and I can see that. The thing with the Silphidae is that they don't have such a narrow head as the glowworms, if you compare two pictures side by side. The other thing is the antenna. And sylphid larvae also have urogompi, which are these kind of two tail-like structures, a bit like Circe at the back end. But something that I'm trying to work on is producing an identification key. So at this point, I really need more voucher specimens so that we can take some proper, lovely photos to help people out in the future.
Okay, I've got a question from Paul. How does the UK fauna compare with the continent?
Good question. Yeah, so we, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head now, but there's at least 10, 15 more species on the continent. The sylphines are more diverse than the necrophorines. When we go outside of Europe and look at the world fauna, you have greater diversity and greater number of species in the cooler climates compared to the tropics. This is because in the warmer environments you have predominantly blowflies dealing with all the decomposition, and even dung beetles take over this role because things decompose so much faster, and the blowflies will locate carrion before these beetles are capable of doing so. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. I don't know if I've answered your question there. I can look up the exact figures for species on the continent for you.
Okay, no more questions at the moment, so should we plough on?
Yeah. Matt, over to you for some trapping, because this is your favourite part.
This is the good part. Yeah. Well, other than the other good part, but this is my favourite. So yeah, trapping. The carrion species are mostly generalists in terms of habitat and opportunity, and they're just opportunistic on the appearance of carrion. So there's a number of ways you can find them. First one I'd definitely recommend is inspecting any carrion you see. So like for example, last year I had quite a haul on a dead crow at the side of the road that just happened to land on a bit of dirt rather than sort of on a path. So that got inspected several times. I was on furlough, fortunately, so I was able to just keep an eye on it a lot of the time. And then also run a light trap. Quite a few of the species are attracted to light. And here, and just also whilst you're inspecting carrion, gloves, I'd recommend taking some gloves with you. Just because obviously it's fairly nasty stuff that can be on there. So definitely gloves are a recommendation. And here are some of the species attracted to light. So you've got quite a few there, and can be found quite regular as well. So next, so here's a few. Is one of our, I believe, is that you there, Simon? I think was the hat on. Yeah. So yeah, there's a few different ways. So ground traps, firstly. And as Simon alluded to at the start of the talk, when he came on our workshop, we buried some carrion. So we had some dead rabbits, and I went a couple of months before the course, and we buried them, and then dug them up a couple of months later. We've set some pitfall traps around the rabbits as well, and yeah, we found quite a few species. I think we had 3 or 4 species, and we also got some live larvae on the trap on the rabbits as well. So that was really interesting. And then also there's baited pitfall traps. And as you can see here, so we've got, I can't remember what that bait was now. Something, probably a mouse most likely, if I know myself.
I think it was mouse.
Yeah. So that's covered in mosquito netting, and it's hung from the top of the cage with the idea that the beetles will fly in, land on the carcass, and then fall in the pitfall trap. There's a few different ways you can do this. You don't have to. This is quite an easy way. You can just put the carrion in the bottom of the cup and check it every day. So some people use killing solution and like antifreeze, non-toxic antifreeze. But yeah, there's several ways you can do pitfall traps, and they're a nice easy way, and using the carrion to bring them in is really good option. Then there's also hand traps as well that you can use. There's people have used like plastic bottles and just put holes in to let the smell out, and they've hung that and put some pitfall traps underneath. You've got baited vane traps as well. So there's a lot of different options when you're trapping for carrion beetles. Recording your sightings. As Ash mentioned at the start, we tend to use iRecord for a lot of our recording. So yeah, we highly recommend it. It's nice and easy to use, user friendly. And so you can check out like how you're getting on, what species you found, where you found, have your own map as well. So it's kind of cool for yourself. That's one of the sort of highlights for me using iRecord. And it helps support research and decision making at local and national levels, allows everyone to make a contribution to science and conservation. And all your records are valuable, whether common or not common. And if you're ever unsure, we could contact us on Twitter, use our email address, put them on the Beetles of Britain and Ireland Facebook group. And if we don't help you out, someone will. Record shots, they are quite quick, they're quite powerful and quite fast, so they can be quite difficult to get a photo of. But an ideal photo is like this one here. So it should capture the antennae, so we can see the antennae shape and color, the thorax, the elytra, back legs, and the tergites. If we've got a good shot like this, if you can get it in a pot or something, then that's ideal. Even if it is a little bit blurry, we can still see the features that we need to on this one. So we can ID that for sure. So yeah, don't worry if it's a little bit blurry. We'll still be able to help you out. And again, we can sort of see, I'm trying to remember myself now what this one, yeah. So we can see the back legs there. Even covered in mites, we've got a good chance. So just get the best picture you can. So can everyone hear Ash?
No, I can't at the moment.
I don't. Oh, Ash,
No,
I don't think we can hear you. Sorry, Ash, I didn't know if it was my internet or something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's weird. It said I wasn't.
Yeah,
It was. Okay. I'll say that again. So I just wanted to mention historical records because when we established the scheme, we did it from scratch. So we didn't have that baseline historic data to compare our incoming records to. So this meant a lot of trawling through collections. I'm a curator. I'm based in Edinburgh at National Museum Scotland, so I was able to database our collection there quite quickly, but it's taken a long time to visit other museums and gradually build up the historic records from across the UK. But we're getting there. There's a few more to go, but it's been brilliant to have the support of my fellow museum colleagues to do this. So this has enabled us to see how the species distributions are changing over time. It's also allowed us to go back and revisit particular sites of interest. So Silphidae carinata is one of our very special species. It was last recorded in 1985 from this site at Great Ridge Wood. So this is in Wiltshire. And we do worry that this is probably now extinct, this species, but by having the last known records of where it was previously found, we were able to go back to the exact location. Matt and I, with the support of Mark Arbuckle, got permission from the landowners, and we did trap for this beetle there. Fortunately, we haven't found it yet, but we do hope to go back, and we've got some colleagues as well that hope to go back to try to see if it is still around. But without the historic records, we wouldn't know where to look. And also there is some happy news. So we do believe that a couple of species have gone extinct from the UK, but just before our book was published, my co-author Steve produced a report on the species statuses for the Silphidae. And looking at the current data, he was able to say that Thanatophilus dispar is actually doing slightly better than previously thought. So that's a nice, happy, positive. One of the sylphids is doing a little bit better than it previously was. So on that note, just for a little bit of fun, to see who's been paying attention, we'll do a little quiz for you. So if you want to use the chat function to do this, Simon can keep an eye on this. I can't actually see the chat myself right now. I'll just see if I can bring it up. And we'll have a little play. So first up, you've got three options. Is this lovely beastie Necrophorus humator? Is it Necrophorus vespiloides? Or is it Necrophorus vespilo? So place your answers in the chat, A, B, or C. And we've got a few for A. Are you sure? So remember, we're looking at the colour of the antenna. We're looking at those orange markings on the elytra. Unfortunately for this one, we're a bit mean, we've not shown you any legs. But look at those antennae and the colour of the elytra. So I'm mostly seeing a few A's and B's in here. I'll put you out your misery. This one is B, Necrophorus vespiloides. So it has got orange marking, so we can eliminate Necrophorus humator. That was the all black species. And then it has the black antennal clubs. So that is the only one of the burying beetles with orange and black markings that has black antennae. And next up, similar. But look again at the colour of those antennae, shape of the legs, and those orange bands on the elytra. Is it Necrophorus investigator, Necrophorus vespiloides, or Necrophorus vestigator? The taxonomists that named these, well, taxonomists that named these burying beetles were quite mean in their names, weren't they? They're all quite similar. Feel free to drop your guesses in the chat if you're brave enough. Okay, we've got a couple for A, and Fiona said Scotty dogs. Yeah, you're spot on there. So it is Necrophorus investigator. So it's got the orange clubs of the antennae. It doesn't have any golden hairs on the pronotum, and it has got a couple of Scotty dogs, but it also has straight hind legs and no big interrupted band at the top here. You can't see the tergites, you can't see those abdominal segments, so we have been a little bit mean. Okay, got another one for you. Is this one Necrophorus investigator, Necrophorus vespiloides, Necrophorus vespilo? So for this one, keep an eye on those hairs, banding, and those legs. Got a couple of guesses for C. You are correct. Well done, team. This is the bent-legged burying beetle. I sometimes call this like the cowboy carrion beetle, or like the John Wayne of the burying beetles. It's got that really bandy-legged stance, really characteristic. One thing to notice about those with the hairs on the pronotum is that with older individuals, they can abrade. So sometimes the golden hairs aren't too obvious. So always check those legs. Now, who might this one be? Is it A, Silphidae, which we didn't cover in too much detail, B, Phosphuga atrata, that's the common snail hunter, or C, Necrodes littoralis, that was the Sexton shore beetle? Excellent, lots of votes for B. Well done, folks. It is Phosphuga atrata, which is the common snail hunter. So you can nicely see its elongate head here, which it uses to devour the snails. And one more for you. This one's a little bit more tricky, but is it Thanatophilus sinuatus, Thanatophilus rugosus, or Necrodes littoralis? Simon's gone for A. Congratulations, Simon, you're correct. So this is Thanatophilus sinuatus. Hopefully you can recognise that it's Thanatophilus based on its shape. Necrodes is much larger with the more spherical pronotum, but the key difference here between A and B is the elytra. So Thanatophilus rugosus meaning wrinkled, it has the lumpy bumpy elytra, whereas these are nice and smooth. So there we go. Thank you those of you that joined in and being brave enough to give your answers. If you felt really overwhelmed and unsure, don't worry. I hope we've just given you a flavour today, and you can go back in your own time and look over the key and familiarise yourself with these features. To be honest, once you've got a live beetle in front of you, that's when all this knowledge really comes together and you can put it into practice. So all that's left to say is we hope to just carry on boosting the recording effort, hopefully deliver some in-person workshops at some point down the line, and create that resource for identification of the larvae as well. We'd end with this lovely fun picture from that workshop that Simon mentioned. Here he is, right in the centre. Everyone was gloved up, so I would like to take this opportunity to remind you, if you are going to be joining the Carrion Club and searching for carrion beetles, be sure to always have a pair of gloves with you. And on that note, big thank you to everybody that's supported us so far, especially everyone that's submitted records, everybody that's allowed us to use their fantastic images, and thank you to you for joining tonight. Of course, we've got our pun here, keep calm and carry on.
Thank you both so much for, well, I say joining us, but you know what I mean. We've got a couple of questions or comments in there. I've got to scroll back up now. Abby asked, how long would it take a predatory beetle to consume mollusks and caterpillars?
Oh, that's a really good question, Abby. I've actually got no idea. I unfortunately, despite looking really hard, haven't seen this in action yet with Phosphuga atrata devouring the snails. I've only had the pleasure of looking at other people's photos and videos.
No, that's fine. I know it's quite out there, but I thought, oh, I'm just intrigued.
Well, here's the challenge, right? Here's a challenge. If you can do it, if you can find them, what would be a great thing to do is just to collect a few sacrificial mollusks in with a few of the Phosphuga atrata and just put them together and record your observations there. It's a bit more difficult with Dendroxina because it's not known if there is a specific type of Lepidopteran caterpillar that it's targeting, whether it's a generalist or not. But I think it would be easier to try with the common snail hunter.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, Leslie says, I've found sexton beetles in dormouse boxes associated with dead bird chicks. Do you get records from bird boxes and other sites where the beetles can't bury the carrion in soil?
That's a really interesting one. When we produced the book, we went through, and you'll actually see for each species account, we've got records of the carrion that it's been observed on for each species. With the records of these beetles from nests is quite limited, but there are species in North America that are tree dwelling almost, and this is quite a regular thing that is being found. I believe that it's happened with Necrophorus vespiloides in the UK. I don't know if people that are regularly checking nest boxes are aware of these beetles. Potentially if we raise more awareness or have more people recognising them and then sharing their records, we might be able to figure out a bit more about this and what's going on. But yeah, it's quite uncommon. What would you say, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. It's really interesting. I haven't come across it. I hadn't even thought of it. Fascinating. Yeah, it'd be really cool if that was another source of where we could get some records from. So if you know anyone, send them in.
Yeah. So I see Andy's just dropped a hello in the chat here. Hi, Andy. Recorded them from vein traps. Yeah, so they're all strong flyers. They're all capable of flight. So getting up into the trees is not an issue, but it's whether or not they can then breed on that carrion that's up there. So you've got examples that they don't always have to bury. The species then tend to move a carcass if the kind of ground isn't the right type for burying. So they're quite specific on soil type. Obviously, if it's too dense, too much of a clay soil, they might not be able to successfully bury. But they are observed breeding above ground occasionally. So if you've got really large carrion, if you've got like a dead deer or something, you might get multiple pairs sharing that and breeding just on the kind of soil carrion like interface on the ground.
Sorry, Sarah asked, do the 3 different stridulations sound different to human ears?
I couldn't say. I don't know if we have the right kind of ear morphology to detect those subtle differences.
Sue asks, why do you think carrion beetles seem to be declining?
Matt, do you want to say anything, or are you happy for me to jump in there?
One thing we mentioned was about anthropogenic use of land. So you could say farmlands they are not allowed to leave carrion out, because of disease and things like that for cattle. So that's one reason. Obviously, being in the UK, a lot of our land is farmland, so it's very different. That's a whole massive land that you won't find many carrion beetles in, just because of the lack of carrion. They're not going to be there if they haven't got any food or anything to reproduce on.
Yeah, carrion is such an ephemeral resource, and it is scarce. You would think that with the kind of increase in roadkill that might be good for the beetles, but that's at the side of the road where they haven't got a hope of burying things, despite Martin Harvey filming a quite fascinating video of them moving a mouse across tarmac. I don't think all beetles are successful doing that. And you've also got kind of like the fact that taxidermy, ethical taxidermy, where things are found dead naturally, is kind of popular and almost on the increase, I think. And poisonings. So if any animals have died from a result of poisoning, the flesh that the beetles feed on will also be toxic to them. So that can be fatal. I think my advice would be, if you encounter carrion, please leave it. Like, unless it's a real health issue, it's in a public place, you know, it's a danger to people. If you're out in woodland, if it's your own garden, leave it be. Move it to the bush where it's not, you know, in your way or in the path of your nose, and monitor it. I think people that unfortunately have cats that end up killing birds or small rodents may be tempted to put a carcass into the bin, but then that prevents access and prevents nature doing its natural thing of cleaning up.
Okay, Robert asked, how far away can they detect a corpse?
It's several miles. Yeah, I think it's maybe seven miles is a figure that I've read somewhere. Yeah, they're pretty skilled, and as I said, they're very good flyers, so they'll be capable of flying to wherever the good stuff is.
Grant asked, do you expect any Silphidae to spread to Kent from continental Europe?
Despite being good flyers, I'm not sure. Do you know it? Yeah, I really don't think so. I did double check. There's 28 species recorded from the continent, and we have 21. Well, there are 21 recorded, more like 17 present. I think it's highly unlikely, but we'll always be on the lookout. So that's why it's important to submit your records.
I guess it would be difficult for a pair of one species to get accidentally transported.
Yeah. It would be more like the longhorns, you know, finding one incidental adult.
Okay, Sarah's got a behavioural question. Do we know if the females only mate with one male, or if they sneak in other matings when he's not looking, so he ends up helping with someone else's offspring?
Oh, there's all sorts of fascinating stuff that goes on. So I did work in the lab at the University of Edinburgh for a while, and they do all sorts of research into this. There's another lab in Cambridge that does similar. It's like a soap opera, actually, when burying beetles are concerned. I think that females, from memory, will have multiple matings. Ultimately, like, it's quite strange because the male does stick around, but there's all sorts of other things going on. You'll get rival males and females that will come in, brood parasitism, that, you know, you'll have a female that tries to take over the existing brood, kill the dominant female. Yeah, it's quite brutal, and we haven't even touched on the fact that the parents sometimes kill the offspring. we missed that one out today, Matt. Yeah, I would thoroughly recommend going and reading some of the research that's coming out of Cambridge and Edinburgh for more details on that.
Can go down a wormhole with behavioural stuff for sure.
Okay, so I've got a quick one for my practical trapping purposes. So obviously they can detect cadavers from quite a distance, but if you've got a garden in an urban setting and you're trying either baiting or with light traps, what are the chances of success in an urban suburban environment?
Well, I've actually I live in a flat, and I think I had some mints that we didn't realise had gone off, or it must have been open and it had gone a bit nasty. So I don't have a garden. Well, I have a communal garden, but I don't think my neighbours would have thanked me too much. So what I did was I got a lunchbox, put a load of soil in it from some plants we had on the balcony, put the mints in there, and I got a record of Vesperloides from some mints in a tub on my balcony. So it for sure it can be done.
Yeah, a lot of our recorders are in urban gardens, moth trapping. So yeah, give it a go. Don't think that just because you're in a city or a town that you're not going to get bees. Yeah, if we look at the records, you will see that some of the burying beetles prefer, you know, open habitats, some more woodland specialists, but they will travel this distance for this resource because it's scarce. So give it a go. You'll be surprised. And actually, Necrophorus humata, the All Black species, is really just about to kick off properly now. We're already getting quite a few records in, and yeah, that's one that you'll definitely get wherever you are.
Okay, I'm going to sneak Fiona's in because it's a juicy one, so to speak. Do they eat buried humans, or are we too protected or toxic? Or a variant on that from a forensic point of view, do they eat non-buried humans?
Yeah, unfortunately that is the case. So my background is forensic science. That's actually how I met these beetles for the first time. Not on a human corpse. I was doing experiments with rabbit corpses, but ultimately looking at applying that to human remains. So yeah, they don't differentiate between us and other animals. They will be attracted to our decaying bodies in a very similar way. As for whether we're toxic or not, that would depend if foul play was in action. In the same that I mentioned poisonings earlier, if there's any drugs or toxins in the body, these will be fed on by the insects. So potentially yes to that question. Buried humans, if you're talking about just, you know, passing away in the natural way and being buried legally, legitimately, probably not, because we usually go into coffins and they don't bury down that far. But if there was foul play and remains were buried in a shallow grave, quite possibly, because that's effectively what Matt did when we were trapping. He buried the bunnies in quite shallow graves, and they were teeming with beetles, some of them.
Not very far down at all. Literally just a sort of a thin layer of soil over the top.
But yeah, they're not capable of munching through coffins.
Okay, she meant formaldehyde. Okay.
Formaldehyde, yeah, I think that would be quite toxic to the beetles.
Okay, I think we'll let you go there, but thank you very much for both the talk and the quizzes and answering our many questions.
You're very welcome.
Easy to trigger interest with this group.
Yes, please spread the word. If you ever have any follow-up questions or you want a bit of help with identification, as Matt said, just get in touch with us. Simon, you can circulate the scheme email and or our Twitter links. And yeah, get in touch, check out that link, download the identification key, and have some fun. They're a great group. They're a really good group for beginners. So hopefully once you've tackled the sylphids, you can then start to look at dung beetles and hysterids and all sorts of other lovelies.